Hi there, welcome back to your favorite weekly deep dive show on stories contemporary and consequential for India. This week I pick up two, one national and one foreign. Member of Parliament from Srinagar, Syed Agha Ruhullah, came out with a podcast interview this week setting out a certain narrative on Kashmir, deliberately provocative and subtly separatist. Kashmir's accession was an immoral real estate deal for India, according to this young National Conference MP. And the India of today is not what his forefathers signed for in 1947, he says, among many other things. So without getting provoked, let us scan the Kashmiri psyche through this interview and frame some responses. Also, Elon Musk has been acting as an able wingman to Donald Trump as the two set up the American foreign policy agenda ahead of the January 20 inauguration for the president-elect. It is typical Silicon Valley disruption, typically Trumpist. But is it good always? What it means for us in India? We have a look. Let's get going. Did India get Kashmir as a piece of real estate through an immoral deal? Does India owe anything more to the people of Kashmir than it does to the people of Assam or Bihar or Kerala? Should India bankroll the terror-sympathizing political ecosystem of Kashmir any further? Does India need a certificate of secularism from those who foment separatism in Kashmir in the name of Islamism? These are some of the questions that came up from a podcast by Srinagar's Lok Sabha MP of the National Conference, Syed Agha Ruhullah. The first-time MP is a young veteran, having been the youngest cabinet minister in the Jammu and Kashmir government in the year 2009. He has been a three-term MLA from the Budgam Assembly constituency of Srinagar before coming to national politics through his membership of the parliament this general election. Ruhullah also comes with a strong political lineage of the family of the Aghas, who have also doubled up as religious and spiritual heads of the Shia sect in Kashmir, Ruhullah included. Of late, Ruhullah has been giving the impression that he is at loggerheads with the first family of the NC, the Abdullahs. Not only has he countered his leader, Omar, on social media, but has also participated in student protests outside Chief Minister's residence over the issue of quota-based reservation in jobs last month. Maybe he is upping the ante to keep his pocket borough of Budgam to himself, lest it go to his uncle Agha Syed Mahmood, since Omar vacated it, retaining his original seat of Gandarbal. There is yet another view according to which Ruhullah and Omar are jigri yars, chuddy buddies, who are playing good cop and bad cop to keep the centre and the people of Kashmir engaged. Whatever. I am not on NC or Agha family politics. The Srinagar MP has attempted a shrewd spin on Kashmir, and it needs to be responded to. Let me put across the key themes delineated by Ruhullah before we dissect and respond. What has Ruhullah said? The podcast begins with Ruhullah claiming that this is not the India his forefathers joined in 1947, picking up episodes like the unfortunate one from Delhi last year where a cop is seen kicking a Namazi on the road. Ruhullah carefully builds a picture of a Hindu India that has othered and second-rated its largest minority, the Muslims. Sambal is slipped in, as is bulldozer justice being practiced in Yogi Adityanath's Uttar Pradesh. His narration of the events of 1947 is almost Churchillian, that the India that came about in 1947 was part of a deal-making in which everyone negotiated, not just Muslims, but Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, and the princely states. That if Junagadh and Hyderabad came to India for their Hindu demography, Jammu and Kashmir naturally belonged to Pakistan, but for a socialist Sheikh Abdullah. That while it was being deliberated upon whether to go with Pakistan or India, the tribal invasion gave India the window which India capitalized by forcing an immoral instrument of accession. It was an unwanted deal between two civilizations, real estate हड़प लिया. But हम इस जख्म को भी भूल जाते हैं, he says. Second, Ruhullah builds the narrative that India was secular due to Article 370, that Kashmir was a prop for India to showcase its secularism. like we milked Kashmir to buttress our secular credentials in the eyes of the rest of the world. As in, if India is secular, it is because Kashmiris decided to be with India and not vice versa. Really? But let's listen more. In defense of Article 370, he claims similar provisions were sought and given to Himachal, Lakshadweep and the Northeast. That those exceptions are prevalent in many nations around the world, the most visible example of which is the United States of America, where all the 50 states have their own constitution and flag, apart from the federal constitution and the national flag. These are in the main. He then goes on to make some narrow political points, like tourism in Kashmir is an RSS-inspired project of cultural invasion to change Kashmir's Muslim character. Like Article 35A predated 1947 and was a secular legislation from the Dogra period brought in to preserve Jammu and Kashmir's geo-economic identity and interests. Like alcohol consumption is becoming a social nuisance and even pushes a diabolical suggestion that the increase in drug abuse among the youth of the valley somehow has the sanction of Indian state. Let us deal with these arguments one by one. Insurgencies in the northeast or left-wing extremism-infested states are a challenge to India's unity and territorial integrity and are being similarly dealt with. India is not the only country facing such a challenge to its nation-building project. From Spain to the United Kingdom, from Canada to Russia, and even China have active insurgencies that have seen national security responses spread over decades. And those are ongoing. This argument that states in the USA have their own constitution is a wrong one. As per the 10th Amendment to the Bill of Rights, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively. Which basically means that the state constitutions in the USA are nothing more than a compilation of what we have as the state and concurrent lists of the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. The constitutions of the states are part of a federating mechanism that was thrashed out during a civil war, unlike India, where the states constitute units of an organic whole which predates the Constitution. The United States came into being with its Constitution. In our case, the Constitution of 1950 and the instruments of accession of 1947 were only milestones, albeit important ones, in the millennia-old journey of a civilization that has existed as a nation with the state part, by which I mean the political executive, being in flux from the time of Ashoka to Akbar and from Mountbatten to Modi. Of course, Nehru in between. But the more important part comes in here. Agha Ruhullah, you pitched it as a civilizational standoff. Very good. Mr. Ruhullah, please tell us, when does your civilization begin? In 1586 with the Mughals, or with the coming of the Chucks of Dardistan before that, or even before that with the coming of Muhammad bin Qasim in 712 CE, or maybe 642 of the Common Era. What was in Kashmir before that? Was there a civilization before your ancestors thought of Kashmir as a beautiful real estate worth cultivating saffron on? If there was a civilization before that, how long did it exist before your civilization came in? How do you connect with it? Raj Tarangini might be a mix of fact and fantasy, but do you see a civilization in it or not? With all your erudition, Mr. Ruhullah, you sure would have put a date on the Kashmir Mahatmya. What period you think Nilmat talks about? And what cultural invasion you are talking about, Mr. Ruhullah? Can your children read the Kashmiri script? No. You speak a Kashmiri language embellished with Persian and Arabic, and your children read Kashmiri in Urdu and Persian. They cannot even identify the legacy, Sharda script. That hill looming large over the constituency you represent, Mr. Ruhullah, Shankaracharya Hill in Srinagar, is named after a saint who institutionalized the idea of Advait, non-dualism between self and God. Tawheed in your words. Do you have moral courage, Mr. Ruhullah, to look beyond what you think, highly mistakenly, was the arrival of Tawheed in Kashmir and India? Maybe if you do, you might find better answers to your questions yourself. I can give you the date from where your moral courage should begin. Friday of November 3 in the year 2000, the day your father was blown to smithereens. Nobody knows better than you who killed him, who made him Shaheed. You know who killed Sajjad Lone's father. You know who killed Mirwais Umar Farooq's father. You look shifty-eyed in that one passing mention of your father in the podcast. Obviously, because that was your moment of cowardice, of moral bankruptcy, the naked moral bankruptcy of your tryst with separatism. If there's a civilizational standoff in Kashmir, Mr. Ruhullah, it is between the one that believes in Ekam Sat, Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Truth is one, wise men call it with various names, and the other, which believes there is only one truth and only one way to reach that truth. And those who do not believe in that one truth and one path can be blown up using IEDs, like it happened with your father, Mr. Ruhullah. Of course, this is not the India you joined in 1947. That India was perhaps steeped in the idealism of Gandhi. It was guided by the gullibility of Nehru, perhaps. Perhaps it was even foolish to believe that the United Nations could solve what was happening in Kashmir. The India of today is a realist India. It believes in its destiny. More importantly, it believes in its capacity to shape its destiny with its own hands. If that makes you uncomfortable, so be it. With you or without you, and in spite of you, the civilizational destiny would be realized. And what is happening in Kashmir will not happen in India of the future. What is happening in India would happen in the Kashmir of the future. It is already happening in some ways, Mr. Ruhullah. The job quotas that are agitating you are part of that new India in Kashmir. Look at the irony. In the same podcast, you say you seek to build a coalition of the oppressed with the Dalits in the rest of the country. But in Kashmir, you protest giving reservation to the same oppressed Dalits. Why? Because you see those same oppressed classes as an obstruction to the informal Parchi system of employment that prevailed before the abrogation of Article 370. By an estimate, almost half of the 500,000 employees of the government of Jammu and Kashmir got their jobs through this informal route. And you grudge the loss of that pelf and patronage. Stop this pathetic attempt at guilt-tripping India. Enough of this blackmailing elevated to an art form when it comes to othering of Muslims. Unfortunately, what begins as guilt-tripping ends with Jinnah's 14 points. This new India is not going to countenance that. There are no British to broker a deal, moral or immoral. The DNA of separatism is being surgically removed by the new India that you do not like. It might be a long-term project, but it would be taken to its logical conclusion. You said you felt stripped like Draupadi in the Mahabharata when Article 370 was being revoked by the Parliament. If you must quote from scriptures, I have a better analogy. What happened on August 5, 2019 was more like a Sudarshan Chakra beheading, the Shishupal of separatism in Jammu and Kashmir. Come out of the fear that has paralyzed your thinking, Mr. Ruhullah. The followers of the sect of which you are a spiritual leader could not carry out Muharram processions for 3 decades and more in Badgam, your home and political turf. It is happening now. There were moments of truth also, by the way. Like when Mr. Ruhullah says that terrorism in Kashmir was not to save Article 370, but an extreme ideology for Pakistan. That there is a reason why militancy picked up when it did. Because Pakistan had tasted blood in Afghanistan in the mid-1980s and realized that it could be replicated in Kashmir. That the idealism of Nehru was matched by that of Sheikh Abdullah when he refashioned Muslim conference as national conference to take away the sectarian spin. He gets it right again when he says, more Muslims have died in Kashmir insurgency. It is an unfortunate truth. Give up the gun. Deaths stop immediately. Ruhullah does own up to the moral responsibility of the Kashmiri Pandit exodus. Dono haath jodkar, I apologize. There is a need to sit together. We are incomplete without them, he says in that moment of truth. Mr. Ruhullah, in many ways, is the product of his times, a victim as much as the perpetrator. But be rest assured, a new generation is coming up in Kashmir, a generation which sees the futility of the Azadi slogan. Youth who know the shame of carrying a Pakistani passport. The youth of Kashmir does not want beggars written on their foreheads when they travel abroad. This generation in Kashmir realizes that a Sarkari Naukri is not the end of the world. That is the reason why Jammu and Kashmir has seen an ecosystem of 1,000 startups coming up in the last 5 years. 800,000 women are scripting their own destiny through self-help groups. This youth knows that singing national anthem is not imposition of RSS ideology. Ultimately, among the few right things he says, Ruhullah admits that this mulk, this nation, is our reality. We accept this reality. It is our responsibility to make this reality better. Join in, Mr. Ruhullah. This new India is willing to work for 90 hours in a week, every week, on New Kashmir too. Moving on. There's a new messiah in town. He can sometimes be mascaria and other times deadpan serious. From street crime in California to the future of human race. From population implosion to frontiers of science and tech and everything in between. Nothing escapes his application of mind, and his solutions come pronto in short, crisp tweets. His latest obsession is regime change in the American arc of influence. He is Elon Musk. This week, he has done an interview on his social media platform X with a rising star from the German right, AfD leader Alice Weidel, trying to bring to her some global attention. Has held a meeting with allies to deliberate on whether the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer, be ousted. Called Canadian PM, just out Trudeau, girl, you are not important anymore. Musk has also talked up opposition in France, Denmark and Norway. Like this column suggests, Musk has even cultivated individual MPs who push his ideology, reflect his concerns, bat for his interests, and align their politics with his positions. Debate is intensifying in several European countries about Musk's political interference. Given his power and influence, it can be consequential. Look at some of the reactions. This is how German government responded. The normal people, the sensible people, the decent people are far in the majority in this country, a spokesman said. A week after the government accused the tycoon of using his social media site X to try and promote the interests of the far-right Alternative for Germany, AfD, ahead of the federal elections in February. We act as if Mr. Musk's statements could influence a country of 84 million people with untruths or half-truths or expressions of opinion. This is simply not the case, he added. Olaf Scholz was not the only European leader with strong words for Musk on Monday, with France's President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Gahr also raising concerns.
Entscheidend ist, dass Herr Musk eine in Teilen rechtsextremistische Partei unterstützt hat und wie man sieht, ja nicht nur hierzulande in dieser Richtung agiert. Und das ist etwas, wo wir nicht nur nicht einverstanden sind, das weise ich zurück.
10 years ago, who could have imagined if we had been told that the owner of one of the largest social networks in the world would support a new international reactionary movement and intervene directly in elections, including in Germany, said Macron. Starmer was asked to react to comments from Musk, who has implied that Starmer did not do enough to go after child grooming circles when he was a prosecutor. those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible. They are not interested in victims, they are interested in themselves, Starmer told a press conference without mentioning Musk by name. Norway's Store said he found it worrying that a man with considerable access to social networks and significant economic resources is so directly involved in the internal affairs of other countries. Musk is also accused of using his influence peddling in aid of his business interests. Following mutual praise between him and Giorgia Meloni, now reports have emerged that the Italian government is in talks to sign a US $1.65 billion deal for Starlink connectivity. The opposition is already alleging a sellout on national security. What fueled those voices is the fact that the reports of the deal emerged only days after Meloni had a meeting with Musk at President-elect Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida.
The problem is, when wealthy people use their resources to fund parties, associations, political representatives in the middle of the world to condition the political choices of national states. That's not what Musk is doing. Elon Musk financed the election campaign in his country of his candidate in a system in which, by the way, I point out that it is quite common. But I am not aware of Elon Musk financing parties, associations, or political exponents around the world. This, for example, is what George Soros does. And yes, I consider that to be a dangerous interference in the affairs of nation-states and in their sovereignty. Is the problem that Elon Musk is influential and rich, or that he is not left-wing?
SpaceX has more than 7,000 satellites in space and provides services to over 100 countries. We know the role Musk played in the Ukraine war, helping Ukraine sustain its war efforts, but sometimes obliging the Russians too at the switch of a button. A concerned European Union has commissioned a project to have a rival to Starlink with 260 of its own satellites by the year 2030, a typical European deadline. Closer home, just last week, our ISRO had to delay launch of its SpaceX mission by a couple of minutes due to SpaceX satellite traffic. How mercurial the maverick can be. Only a fortnight after hailing Nigel Farage as the next best hope for the British, he trashed him in favor of jailed Tommy Robinson at the first whiff of disagreements. This at least suggests that for Musk, there are no permanent friends or foes, only permanent interests. While that's a classical foreign policy formulation, it does not apply to individuals who are at best the first buddies of the president. And that too, for how long is the question. Remember, Trump is muskier than Musk when it comes to guarding self-interest. There are already reports of some disquiet building up in Trump transition team over almost permanent and often uninvited presence of Musk at the Mar-a-Lago. In one instance, Musk reportedly gate-crashed into Trump's meeting with Amazon boss Jeff Bezos. What Musk is doing seems fun from a distance, and it for sure does not amount to regime change, something which was perfected by the Soros ecosystem in cahoots with the deep state. But still, it is jarring. It assumes people and societies do not know what's in their self-interest. It treats institutions with contempt. It's a world where in his own little galaxy, the tweets are commandments. We need to be very careful of the messiahs messing around. There have been too many already. The world can for sure do with one less, particularly when this one comes with business links attached. Thanks for watching.